I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's Office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
On this podcast right now.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. My name is Saeed Khan. Good to be back in the D after spending a bit of time over on the English Isle, if you will. We are joined by a great panel today, and we've got, I think some of you might actually be newbies, at least for me, so let's kick it off. We have automotive journalist, founder, and editor-in-chief of the DetroitBureau.com, Paul Eisenstein. We have attorney Joel Sklar. We have community and labor activist Barb Ingalls. And somewhere in the wings there, we have Bob Ingalls as well. We have community and political consultant Anthony Bryant. And of course, we have Deadline Detroit co-founder Allan Lengel. So I thought we would begin with the yayo. Cocaine found in the West Wing of the White House. It seems as though people are trying to make a big deal out of this. Allan.
I've got a little video which kind of gets to the heart of this real quickly.
For bringing up Hunter, as if like he isn't the most obvious culprit. Is there somebody else we're missing, media? Should we be talking about Kamala's laughter? Is that what you would prefer? But this is a guy who leaves drugs, guns, and laptops everywhere. He got thrown out of the Navy for coke. He got thrown out of the Chateau Marmont. It's hard to get thrown out of the Chateau Marmont. Trust me, I have tried. And then, of course, he was just at the White House. So I guess, you know, Occam's razor, this is the most obvious thing that could happen. But I love the fact that, like, if you bring it up, it's like, oh, typical, you'd bring up Hunter. What about a father's love for his son?
What an eel.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is, like, you know, if he's going to go to Hunter, my first instinct is, what about some Republican operative who dropped it in the White House to set up Hunter? Yeah, Hunter's been hanging out in the White House. He must have brought cocaine. He left it somewhere. By the way,
Barb.
Anthony, you're on mute. You're muted.
I would like to know why Hunter Biden would have to stick his cocaine in a cubby if he went to visit his father in the White House. It would be in his pocket or in his wallet. It's so stupid. These people are just so stupid. That's the only word I can use for them.
Let's get down to it. If we want to talk about cokeheads, maybe this just got left there by Don Jr. Every time you look at the man, he looks like he's done about 3 or 4 lines too many.
Well, apparently, Paul, that might be true because I think right now they're testing at in a gay bar somewhere where in the bathroom where apparently Don Jr. had sex with somebody. So there might be some breadcrumbs. But I want to go ahead and just point out Kenneth talking about a patriot with the booger sugar. Which I have to say is the finest piece of prose that I've seen in a long time. So thank you for our loyal viewership with that. Apparently, the contraband or the alleged contraband was found near the press briefing room. So and it seems as though it was at least 72 hours since the last time maybe Hunter Biden was even there. The chances of it being him are pretty low, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but even assuming that it was him, who cares? I mean, truly, this is
Right.
it's a non-issue. It's a red herring. It's another, a shiny thing to follow and distract you from the real issues.
It's another case of the Republicans being extremely good at manipulating the conversation. Democrats have to address that problem. I mean, I keep hearing Biden crime family. Yet when you look at it, you're looking at the Trump crime family, which we know has been involved with all sorts of shady deals. So I think that we need to start very clearly addressing the Trump crime family as much or more than we keep hearing about Biden's problems.
Anthony, is this just the woes of the summer doldrums that the news cycle kind of has hit a bit of a low, and this is how it's getting filled up?
Yeah, I think there's so many better things that we could be talking about. And like, who cares if Hunter Biden left coke in the White House? Even if I don't think it was him, but if it was, like, he's already been caught with so much worse. Like, there's videos of him driving 120 miles down the street with a crack pipe in his hand. Like,
Right.
I'm not worried about him dropping a bag. Like, who in DC is not doing coke, honestly?
Well, 30 minutes or less to get that pizza to your door there, Anthony. I mean, I wouldn't mind him driving 120 to get me that pizza. So that's a possibility. But I think that the point that you're making, Paul, as well, about how this has sort of a corrosive effect on just the Biden name. We're having a couple of new names that are starting to be dropped into the conversation about 2024. One of them being California Governor Gavin Newsom, and then, of course, everybody's favorite anti-vax scion of a dynastic family, Robert Kennedy Jr. So, is this going to start to pick up some momentum going in, or how do we look at this? Is it just simply chatter?
I think a bit of chatter. I think Kennedy Jr. doesn't have a chance. He's pretty much a flake when you start listening to him, and I don't think he's going to get any traction. Gavin Newsom might gain a little bit of traction. He is a darling among some people on the more to the left than Biden has been. On the other hand, he's also taken a lot of hits. Remember, he did have a recall that he beat, but that's shown that a lot of people would like to go after him if they could. I think Biden is going to be the eventual nominee unless, and it's a long year plus till the election, he has some health issues or truly makes a major mistake.
I mean, I think part of the issue is that I cringe when I see Biden. I mean, he's 80, he's going to be the oldest president ever in the world. He'll be super, super old. It's difficult to watch him. It's difficult to listen to him. I think, and I'm voting for Biden. I'll vote for whoever the Democrats put up there, but I think it's a real issue. I'm concerned about it. He looks a little bit slower. He doesn't look dynamic. I would like to see somebody else push because I think there are a lot of, I have doubts about Biden's longevity. I mean, I think it's irresponsible to run at post 80. I think it's just irresponsible. And I think, I would love to see somebody else actually give him a push and maybe get some headway.
So we had John Adams, a viewer, I take it not the second president of the United States, asking some questions regarding whether it is corporate news that has besmirched RFK's name and his particular perspective. In fact, I think also referring to them as rigged primaries, and seemingly acknowledging that Biden will probably be the nominee in said rigged primaries. Is this sort of a please no second president jokes? Okay, duly noted. Thank you, and apologize for that. But he was the first of our two sets of presidential families that actually had a son become president later. So there's that trivia. What do we think here? I mean, is this something that does mainstream media run the risk, like they did in 2016, of being dismissive of fringe candidates like RFK Jr. and again also Trump?
Well, I think there's certainly a difference between RFK Jr. and Trump. I mean, I think Trump was not fringe enough in 2016. I think RFK Jr. is truly a fringe candidate in the same way that Dr. West, who's going to be out there, who could potentially be a spoiler, but he's not a mainstream candidate. That's my read on it.
Yeah, Barb.
But isn't, I think one of the problems is the news media really does love this kind of silliness. And they're giving RFK Jr. a lot more press than he deserves. But he's also if you're an anti-vax MAGA person, they like him. They like him a lot, and he might be nuts, and he is. But I think I do think it is a distraction, but I think they're playing into it. Third-party candidates, I think that even the most left of people are staying away from that this year because we see the damage. And then you look at Cornel West, who everybody loves. He hired, if I'm right, Jill Stein as his campaign manager, and which is the saddest news I've heard today, is somebody that I used to actually admire, because that woman's bonkers.
Thanks for clearing that up, Barb, because I thought, given how you set that up, that you admired Jill Stein. So
no, sorry. no, I got called a Nazi one time online because I listened to her for a long time. She was on NPR, and they gave her a very long interview, and at the end of it, I was like, nope, cuckoo bananas, and no, Mr. Adams, I don't like Jill Stein. I like serious people for president of the United States. So.
Yeah, serious people are a problem. Trump gained a lot of traction. Many people, I think, will argue that the reason he got in was simply because he was able to make so much crazy noise. He got far more attention than he should have. Remember, even CNN would put cameras out at campaign rallies, and they would just stick the cameras there and gab for 15 or 20 minutes while they waited for him to actually take the stage. They made him a much more serious candidate than he was. And they seemed to love playing up all the extremes. What they didn't realize was that a lot of those extreme positions seem to play to a country that you can only describe as angry and frustrated.
Paul, you mentioned something about RFK Jr. Gaining a bit of traction among MAGA voters and anti-vax. Do you see a possibility that they would then, either because they really like him or to kind of mess things up for Biden, move over and vote in the Democratic primaries in early 24?
There's a possibility. I mean, everything is so up in the air right now. I think it is dangerous to even remotely think we're at a stage where it's politics as usual or voter behavior as usual. In fact, that's really what it's all about right now, is voter behavior. I don't think we in the media or even those people who are running the campaigns have come close to understanding what's motivating voters and how they'll act. Kennedy could go several ways. As a third-party candidate, he could devastate Trump, because remember, Trump can be faulted because he once upon a time supported the vaccines, and he still at times brags about pushing through the fast development of them. So Kennedy could be a very weird spoiler and work either way, for example.
A buddy of mine knew RFK Jr. when he was getting his LLM at Pace University. And RFK Jr. was the director of the environmental law program there. I mean, it seems as though, given how climate change is such a big issue, and increasingly so, that all RFK Jr. had to do was run as the climate change candidate. Brush aside some of the things about anti-vax, or maybe just sort of mention it, but control the narrative. The fact that that's the hill that he's looking to die on is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I don't know where he came from. I don't know why this has become such a big issue for him, but I think that is going to be his doom. It's just not going to fly enough with enough people.
Now, Allan, you know who his wife is, don't you?
I do, but I can't remember.
Oh my God,
Adina!
that's a Shonda.
Oh
Adina.
yes, wait a minute. Curb Your Enthusiasm,
There
Cheryl,
you
whatever.
go.
Cheryl
That's a
Hines.
Shonda. I love
I don't know how you
Cheryl.
didn't get that.
I love Cheryl.
That's what
Everybody
it's.
loves Cheryl. That's why they can't believe what's going on. So yeah,
Right. It's criminal.
yeah,
That's
it
criminal.
does.
That's what it took. It took me saying Shonda to kind of jar your memory of.
Ding, ding, ding. Little Yiddish will always unearth.
Well, speaking of Trump, it seems as though there's been a lot going on in the news in the last 24 hours. One is it seems as though there's now a little bit of attention on a December the 20th, 2020 meeting in the Oval Office, which had such luminaries as Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and a few others, including White House attorneys, who seemed to be imploring Trump not to do anything that was untoward, but he was listening to outside advice to go ahead and push for finding ways to overturn the election, including, as it turns out today, news that Special Counsel Jack Smith is in fact investigating not Georgia now. That seems to already, it seems so 2022.
It's all right.
But,
It's ripe for an indictment down there already. Jeez, what are they waiting
but
for?
looking at Arizona Governor Ducey and the possibility that that Trump was trying to influence him, as well as news that apparently his vice president was also on the phone with Governor Ducey, trying to see if they could find 11,000 votes or more to go ahead and overturn the Arizona race. So are we just now becoming a little bit numb to the sheer volume of potential indictments?
I think it's so insane. You can't imagine if Nixon, if some previous president had tried to change the outcome of an election like that, they wouldn't have lasted more than 10 minutes in office. Way back in the 70s, the fellow Republicans, if it were Nixon or whatever, as they did, said, you got to go, man. You got to go. Now it's like people don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about the law. They don't. It's insanity when we think about the whole big picture of trying to overturn a presidential election and everything, all the plotting that went on and the cajoling and all that shit. It's just mind-boggling, but we're so numb to it. A lot of people, a lot of the voters, particularly Trump supporters, say, we don't care. They talk about voter fraud. The biggest voter fraud perpetrated on the American people came after the 2020 election ever. The biggest voter fraud, and they're screaming voter fraud. They're correct in screaming voter fraud, but it's them who are committing the voter fraud.
Well, remember that the party of the Constitution, law, and order is none of the above.
Right.
Barb, you're my music expert here. I don't believe there's a band called Voter Fraud yet, right?
Ain't over, Saeed. Let's go. Come on.
Let's go. I got my ovation in the corner.
Well, I got a question here, if I may, for Anthony, being the youngest of all of us. What's the younger generation thinking about this election? I mean, we're seeing just sort of the old and the passe. Is there any reaction out there in terms of
I don't speak for everybody, certainly, but
Right.
the whispers I hear and the people in my circles and things like that, it just seems like a lot of us are feeling pretty disheveled, disenfranchised, like we invested into these democratic promises from the Biden campaign. He hasn't really delivered. When he said like student loan relief, or we couldn't even protect women's rights, and now it's just like I think a lot of people my age are starting to question whether they're going to come out, and it's going to be it's going to have to be some kind of strategizing in the Democratic parties and to do something in this administration to earn us back, because it seems like they're tired of picking between the lesser of two evils, and it's not benefiting us at all. Like we want to buy houses, like we're not really concerned with Trump's indictment. Like he's going to be rich even if he goes to prison. I want to buy a house. I want equity in my community. And this administration kind of gave us a promise that they would do something about that. And we've only seen, this inflation continue to skyrise, and what's going on in Canada. Like, I don't know if you guys are looking at like those housing markets over there, but that's really getting scary if they're going to have 90-year mortgages out there. Like, what are you going to pass that debt on your children? Like, so just a lot going on, and we are not getting what kind of was sold to us.
Wait a second, Anthony. What you just said, I'm not accusing you of this. I'm accusing people that believe any of that to be insane. Full out, no stop, out of their fucking minds. Because the same people who largely sat out the damn 2016 election, young people didn't vote, and they allowed Trump to get in. We have the Fifth Circuit Court. We have the local courts stacked with Trumpers. They allowed Trump to put in three Supreme Court justices, all radicals, all unqualified. As a result, Biden's student loan program, reduction program, out the window. Promises of not touching abortion, out the window. Should I continue?
But
why?
So if we're gonna
go
we
ahead.
can pass all the blame onto the Supreme Court and Trump, but young people have been turning out at more like highs since 2016. We came out, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, so it wasn't our fault. It was the Electoral College, right? So I don't think we should be taking the blame for it. It's old white women, white people in general, like that are voting for Trump. It's not young college educated people. It's not black people. It's not Latinos. So we're coming out already. We're doing what we can. Sure, I mean, like, I get you're not going to get all your promises, everything that's promised to you at once, but like, can we get something?
But
like,
the bottom
we can't even
line
get kids
is,
out of the cages. Like,
but the bottom line is, many of the things you just said, Biden moved in favor of, and it's not the Biden administration. Certainly, the loss of abortion rights. Certainly, the loss of affirmative action. Certainly, the loss of the student loan reductions. All those were basically Republican actions, Republican enacted Supreme Court. If you want that stuff, you have to be able to move the government more. And we still have a bloody right-wing court and a bloody right-wing Republican-controlled House. So if people want to continue these policies, let them sit out in 2024.
But Paul, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree. I think we have to look at the lesser of two evils. That's my view. But there are people who are more result oriented. I see young people who are saying, "Okay, we're doing this, and that, and what's the result?" I understand why you're explaining why the result is not what we want, but we see people in the inner city in certain neighborhoods where they say it doesn't matter. I voted for Obama. Our neighborhood hasn't changed. We still have high crime. We have, high levels of imprisonment and stuff like that. They're looking at it and saying, I don't see a change. And that's what I think some of the young people are saying. I mean, we look at it like George Bush, ran against Al Gore and people said, fuck it, I'm voting for Nader. I don't see any difference between the two. Then afterwards, people said, oh my God, there is a difference. 2016, people said, no difference between Hillary and Trump. And afterwards, they were like, holy shit, there is a difference. But it really, unfortunately, we're still in in this country, it's still about voting for the lesser of two evils rather than, when Obama ran, I think a lot of people were excited about Obama. But there haven't been a lot of exciting, maybe Clinton, there was some excitement over that, but I don't know.
All right, let me just, Alan, let me just put it this way. Yeah. 2024, we could face the full institutionalization of all the stuff that Trump started. He's already screwed the Supreme Court, and there are hundreds of truly awful justices on lower levels of the Fed across the country,
including in Miami.
We have states empowered to do things because the Supreme Court's not going to block them. The fact is, we will probably see in 24 to 28 at least one, possibly two more Supreme Court justices retire or die. And do we want to have a Republican or do we want to have a Democrat take their place? Right. Or should say a liberal or a reasonable person as opposed to some of the crooks that we've seen get into the Supreme Court.
Barb.
So Anthony, I get your point, but the reality is 24 is going to determine whether this democracy survives or not. This is not just a little bit of, oh, they'll lean one way or the other. This is the democracy election.
Actually, I think just a viewer, John, said as long as Democrats keep putting in neoliberals, I think that word might be wrong there. I mean, neoliberalism is actually much more of what we find as Reagan and Thatcher economic policy. So it's, I think, far more associated with conservatives. Maybe you might mean progressives there instead of neoliberal, because those two are clearly not the same. Barb.
The DNC is not putting up progressives for
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
The closest we had, right. So I think he is right in talking about these neoliberals, putting up people like Gavin Newsom, like it's a young, fresh face, but it's the same. Right. Yeah. It's a young, fresh face, but it's the same thing that like Biden is doing, like just continuing on small, these small victories that I just feel like people my age are, like you said, were results based. And I just think that there were a lot of larger things that we think Biden could have affected that he hasn't done yet. Like I said, the kids in cages, and we start calling them migrant detention facilities. Like he said he was going to shut those down. And, now we've got even more kids missing and away from their parents. And it's just things like that really upset me and us. And it's not saying we're not going to vote, but you make it pretty damn hard to vote for a Democratic president like that. So he needs to have some kind of major legislation before like 24. Maybe it's going to be weed legalization finally. Like if he can federally, mandate that, or, I think you might win a lot of us back. I think that the freeing people from federal prisons for marijuana charges, I don't think that did much. What was that, like 200 people? That's really a strike of the prison industrial complex right there.
Can I make an observation real quick? It seems as that, historically, just from the panel, Anthony wasn't alive when we were during the Nixon years, during the Civil Rights Act of '64. I was 5. His history is different than mine, and the pessimism that Anthony states is what my son tells me. The same thing. He's 27. I know how you are, Anthony. My son's 27, and he's 25. Exceptionally pessimistic. It's just remarkably pessimistic about what's going on down the line. He has the same view as you, that it's just government as usual, just very disaffected. But what's lost in that, and I'll try to explain, is that, listen, there were generations that gave literally their lives for civil rights. There were generations that gave their lives for abortion rights. There were generations that gave their lives for voting rights. And you were part of that generation, right? It preceded me to the most extent, but you were part of that. And now you are part of something, right? And as I look to my son, I say, you have to resurrect democracy. Our generation was a selfish generation. That's how I look at it. The generation before us, or my dad's generation, was the greatest generation. We were the worst. And so it comes up, I think, to people like you, Anthony, and my son, who have to change the narrative, who have to prioritize, who have to. I want progressives too. I would love to see progressives run. It's going to be up to your generation and your power kind of to do that, because the history is your history. Our collective history is somewhat, we share. But again, you weren't around when Nixon was doing all these things.
And it's difficult to even prop up those progressive candidates, because the majority of people who are funding the DNC, that's what's going to matter. And the candidates they put up, they want to be able to, make money for the party to support their candidates and whatnot. Like, these people are not going to be progressive. You called Bernie Sanders a fringe candidate earlier. Like, he represents like ideas that most of the American population represents. Like, we all, like 75% of us want Medicare for all. Like, and that's not really a fringe idea, but they would, like to make it seem like it is. But I understand the pessimism too. I mean, it just feels like the can has just been kicked down the road for so long, and now it's our turn. We're at the end of the road, right? Like, everybody's gonna be dead by the time it's our turn. So, what are we gonna do with $28 trillion debt? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Barb.
So how do we get? I think one of the,
actually, Alan, I think Barb had.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna stick up for the kids here, the young people here, because look at the state of Michigan. Look at the gains that we've had in Michigan, and it was almost exclusively young people that fanned out, got ballots signed, got to the polls, I worked the elections, the last 3 elections I worked, counting ballots, and it was almost all young people in there. I think that it's up to the Democratic Party to fix their damn messaging and show the things that have been done. And the fact is that none of this stuff comes quickly. And we weren't able to gain the whole House. And I think that that's the source of our problem, but we're doing a really terrible job of telling people. I have a lot of young nieces and nephews, and they tell me that they are so tired of seeing old people in office. And I'm not a fan of ageism because I am one of those old people, but I don't, I mean, we're running an 80-year-old against a 78-year-old. And I'm sorry, those 2 years do not make a damn bit of difference when it comes down to it. And their ideas. And I think Biden's been a much better president than I thought he was gonna, but that we're not doing a good job. Inflation is worldwide, it's global. The housing market problem is global. This is not just the United States, but we're not portraying that. And if you go to the New York Times, who's on the front page of the New York Times today? Donald Trump. Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. And they're supposed to be the liberal press. We have to gain the narrative, and we don't have much time. You know look outside today, you can see the blue sky, but
the problem with the media right now is that Donald Trump saved really, or this may be a little bit over dramatic, but he saved the Washington Post. He saved the New York Times. I have friends at the New York Times and the Post, and the Trump stories are like crack. People love them. They blow up. The traffic is so high. After I wrote I was texting a friend after the maybe a year after the election. He was at the New York Times, and I said, "Hey, how are things at the Times?" He says, "We're trying to figure out how to survive in the post-Trump era." Both the Times and the Post, their subscription rates skyrocketed because every day, and I'd be on the Washington Post site 5 times a day, maybe twice on the New York Times a day, looking for the next crazy Trump story. And he fed that news cycle, and he was so great. So it's so tempting for those papers to continually display stories about them because people read them. People are curious about
them. I mean, the New York Times and the Post are profit-generating enterprises. Their concern is revenue. Writers want jobs. Their concern is revenue. So they're going to post clickbait or stories that may be tangential but really interesting, for whatever salacious reason. So, it's the media, profiting. You'd have to have the media say, you know what, we're not going to get all these eyes today. We're going to let that go. We're not going to cover Trump today. We're going to let that go. I'm not seeing that because it's money. And if Trump generates eyes on the page, you're going to write about Trump until it no longer works.
I mean, how exciting is this? Every day we're waiting for the next Trump indictment. We're waiting for the next revelation in one of the cases and stuff. It's exciting. It's exciting to watch. It makes the news more, palatable.
Right. It's exciting. And it's salacious. Somebody's in trouble. Trump, God, we all hate him. He did something wrong. His bag man did something wrong. His body man, whatever you call the guy, did something wrong. It is great shit to read. I consume it constantly, and I add to that revenue, right? Because I'm watching whatever it is.
Well, I mean, you've got. It looks like you've got a decision that's been made by a lot of media that we really only have to try to get 50% of the country. And here there are studies now that are showing that the red-blue divide is increasing. People now looking to move to a state that represents or reflects their political and ideological values. I mean, red staters moving, or conservatives moving to red states, people who are liberal moving to blue states. But, you're also mentioning the whole idea about media. There's social media. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg, not to be deterred by Elon Musk, this week launched a brand new parallel site that looks an awful lot like Twitter, but this one is called Threads. And apparently now you can become a threader instead of a tweeter. And somehow this way you can stick it to Musk and still, I guess, essentially do everything you would have done on Twitter, except it's integrated with other meta platforms, including Facebook and Instagram. So you've got all of your contact lists all intact and everything. It seems like another smooth move. But then I seem to remember that there were things like Mastodon and other great rivals to Twitter, and Twitter somehow has still survived. So is this meet the new boss same as the old boss?
Of course. And I signed up right away. What the hell? I'm retired. I don't care.
I think again, the lesser of two evils. People are thinking, well, screw Twitter. Elon Musk is off the rails. But Zuckerberg is, look, Facebook has got so many little scams going. I mean, we paid for promoting our site and stuff like that. And we'd talk to some people from Facebook, and they'd say, okay, here's what you have to do. Click this, and that. Give us $2,000. And we would do that. Then a month later, I talked to another person. I say, nothing's happening. We're really not seeing a result. Oh, I don't know why that person told you that. Then we'd ask them, well, what are the algorithms here? Why are, and they go, well, don't know, because they don't tell their salespeople. It's all a crock of shit. I mean, some people do well promoting, but there's a lot of scams going on Facebook run by Zuckerberg.
Anthony, not trying to make this an age thing, but just wondering that given in your age demographic, what's the lean regarding news gathering and also what social media platforms are going? I mean, from what I understand, Facebook is passé. Instagram is, I think, compared to TikTok, becoming passé. I mean, where's the sweet spot now? Because of course that also then affects where campaign ads are probably going to be saturating those platforms.
Yeah, Twitter is a battleground, so that's really a place that is not for the weak. So a lot of people tend to stay off that. But people, who enjoy seeing people get, just berated and destroyed by the public, like myself, love Twitter. And Instagram is becoming kind of phased out just because people are tired of like the influencer culture. It seems like that's on its way out. So a lot of people are starting to lose like their ad revenue from these brand deals and streaming and whatnot. But Threads is really interesting because, a lot of us thought that we wouldn't switch. When Twitter did this thing the other day, I don't know if y'all heard about that. They limited how many tweets you could view in a day. Yeah. Someone said it might have had something to do with like what was going on in France and wanting to limit like how much they could consume about those riots. Who knows? But he like set those limits higher for people who would subscribe and pay money for Twitter, just like what we all thought is when Elon bought Twitter, that he would kind of, party's over, he'd start charging us more for a free service. So Threads comes out and just streamlines this way that you can sign up. So I'm just on Instagram one day, have no intention of signing up for Threads whatsoever. I saw the notification that like people I knew that were friends of mine were posting on it, and I could quickly sign up with the press of a button. So I was like, well, sure, keep all my data, username, and all that. But now you sign up for Threads, you can't erase your Threads account without deleting your Instagram account. So now whoever signed up with that with their Instagram, we're stuck. And I think Zuck said that it was like 30 million people signed up in the first day, which is the fastest like anybody has used like any application, I'm pretty sure. Even ChatGPT took like 5 days to get that long, to get that many users. So really interesting to see how Thread's going to grow. I mean, it's really similar to Twitter now. Kind of reminds me of Twitter before it got all monetized back in like 2014, 15, when we weren't seeing so many ads on there. People were posting more freely, like this is what I'm doing right now. I even find myself, like I don't even use my Twitter like that anymore. It's just not how we use things anymore. And like that Thread seems to be the new locale where we can just, relax, at least for now, and we can just, shoot the shit. So we'll see. It's pretty interesting. As far as like news consumption media, I think we consume about the same as you do, not like, BuzzFeed or anything for anybody's primary news, but I think CNN, those breaking 911 pages and stuff like that on Twitter, where we go. Okay.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what kind of policing is done on that, as in terms of like the standards that are set for Threads in terms of racism and personal attacks and stuff like that. It's a tough medium to control. There's so much shit going on, and you have to figure out where the constitutional rights, the First Amendment plays, and where as a publisher of something, where you set some limits, where you want your platform used for, hatred and personal attacks and kids committing suicide as a result of people ganging up on them and stuff. It's a really complicated thing, and we still are in more of the frontier stage of a lot of these social media things. We still haven't figured out where we draw the line.
Well, last week I met with Rana Ayub, who is an Indian journalist, lives in Mumbai, but writes for the Washington Post. And she was the one who went undercover and published what's known as the Gujarat Files, that back in 2002, when current Prime Minister Modi was chief minister of Gujarat, he he presided over the pogroms, which killed over 1,000 Muslims there. Back then, he couldn't even get a visa to get into the United States. And of course, now he's feted with a state dinner. But describing this whole idea about just the hatred on both Twitter and even on other platforms, and part of the reason why Musk and Zuckerberg are reluctant to go ahead and shut those hate sites down is because India's got a $1.3 billion consumer market. And so the idea that you don't want to go ahead and antagonize them is part of this whole challenge. So something to behold. Well, when it comes to surveillance, which is something that of course could occur on these social media sites, now comes word that surveillance footage shows Trump aide Walt Nauta, who just finally pleaded not guilty. He was finally arraigned because he couldn't find an attorney to represent him or that he could afford. Shows him moving boxes at Mar-a-Lago days before the DOJ visit. And it seems as though the quantity that he moved out of the zone that was then investigated was more than the boxes that were put back in. So it looks like this is Desdemona's or handkerchief that might actually incriminate Trump with his own cameras. Yeah, Alan.
I was going to say, I think it's a fascinating situation we have here. We have his aide, who's a nothing in the big picture of this, except sort of the errand guy, doing this. And so the question is, the FBI and Justice Department obviously went to him and said, look, we need you to flip on your boss. You need us to tell us that your boss told you to do that. We need, to put you on the stand. You need to testify. He's saying, no, fuck you. Well, that takes away. Look, that's one of the leverages the FBI and the Justice Department use to get people to and they threaten them with, you're going to go to prison if you don't cooperate. Well, if he goes to prison and he's a small fish in this whole thing, how is it possible that Trump, facing 37 counts, how can he not go to prison if we send this guy to prison? And so I think there's sort of an interesting dynamic there.
Well, I think one of the issues is at this point is this guy's got a lawyer who has no federal experience. I think he had to actually register to file online with PACER, which is the electronic court filing system for federal courts. So she is a civil lawyer who I think maybe does some low-end criminal work, DUIs.
Right.
I think she's not going to, if she stays with him, he's poorly represented. I think that's obvious. You'll see if over time he realizes that, my God, I'm in real jeopardy. I can go away, be away from my family. He may actually get somebody who's independent of Trump. I don't know who's paying his lawyer. I have no idea. But he may get a real competent criminal lawyer who's going to say, you got to start, feathering your own bed here, and you've got to turn. You may have to consider, providing some evidence against Trump in exchange for some immunity or a lesser sentence. So I think when he gets more sophisticated, competent counsel, I have no idea what her standard is, but somebody who's more experienced, I think you're going to see his self-interest start being prioritized as opposed to Trump's, and the dynamic's going to change, and more information will be forthcoming, which will put a nail, hopefully, in Trump's coffin.
Well, maybe he needs to start. Maybe he needs to start by not deluding himself into thinking that he was one of Trump's sons. And I think, Alan, you might have a video to that effect.
I don't. You know what? I don't know that I have. Let me see. Do I have something for?
I thought you had something on Trump Jr.
Oh, I don't. You know what I do have, which I want to play, is this is sort of a non sequitur here, but I'll play it because it's so good.
You want to ban drag show readings to children.
To minors, yes.
Why? Why?
What are you protecting?
Why can we prohibit children from voting, those under 18 from voting?
Is that free speech?
They can continue to exercise their free speech, just not in front of a child.
Why?
Because the government does have a responsibility to protect.
I'm sorry?
The government does have a responsibility in certain instances to
What's
protect
the
children.
leading cause of death amongst children in this country? And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not drag show readings to children.
Correct, yes.
So what is it?
I'm presuming you're going to say it's firearms.
No, I'm not going to say it like it's an opinion. That's what it is. It's firearms. More than cancer, more than car accidents. And what you're telling me is you don't mind infringing free speech to protect children from this amorphous thing that you think of. But when it comes to children that have died, you don't give a flying fuck.
I just thought that was powerful.
That is worth being a non sequitur. But I mean, it really isn't a non sequitur because it is entirely relevant. But the point, Joel, that you made regarding Nada's lawyer, I mean, do you think he's then just going to have the chutzpah to turn around and say, "I got ineffective counsel," and try to have whatever case or conviction that he may face overturned?
Well, I mean, if he's playing the long game and thinks Trump's going to get reelected, maybe playing the pardon game, you know, if that's really what he thinks. When this lawyer, again, goes into federal court and begins to understand the enormity and the sobriety of what this court is and the pressure she's under, she's going to realize she's not competent to handle this case. I mean, she's going to realize this isn't a DUI in a district court. It's not a collection case or some insurance case. This is something with massive implications, with massive amount of pressure, with the massive amount of coverage. And my guess is that somebody's going to speak to this guy, maybe even a judge, and somebody's going to say, you got to consider counsel for yourself that has some experience in criminal federal, law, because the lawyer you have now isn't. And so I do think it's going to change the dynamic because I over time and. Robert Morgan is a great criminal lawyer in the city of Detroit. He says that over time, when you twist, the feds will let you hang a little bit and twist. The pressure is enormous. And I think that Nada's going to get a real lawyer who has some experience, and then he's going to flip.
Although something is so crazy here that this guy works with Trump and he gets this like third-rate lawyer, you would think they would say, hey, make sure that Walt gets a decent representation. I mean, he could get the federal defenders down in Miami have a great. There's a lot of great federal defenders there, and he probably gets a pretty decent salary, so he probably can afford a regular attorney. But it's amazing that you could get this person who really doesn't have federal experience, who does these nickel and dime type cases. And has no experience with this massive case that's happening before them.
It shows you the appeal of representing Trump and those in his orbit, which doesn't, which is.
But I mean, I think it also shows a certain amount of delusion. And speaking of which, I think one of the main figures in QAnon, a guy by the name of Michael Protzman, who was the leader of the Dallas branch of QAnon, apparently was killed in a dirt bike accident yesterday, and many QAnon people believe it didn't happen, despite the fact that he was pronounced dead at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. They still think he's coming back, that this is all part of something completely staged.
Yeah. Well, he's probably going to run for office with JFK Jr.
Right. That's right. Well, also like Jeremy Rogers, 28, the Michigan man who was just arrested in Florida for allegedly attacking a police officer at the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th. The whole idea that this was all a setup and that this is somehow fake, and so he was apparently seeking asylum in DeSantis country, closer to the orbit of Trump in West Palm Beach, to be sure. Before we go to our last segment, I just thought I'd go ahead and throw this out as a matter of levity. Japan Airlines has launched a new clothing rental service for international travelers. So if you're coming into Japan on Japan Airlines and you don't feel like packing too much, or because of the fees for bags, you can go ahead and rent clothes to use while you're in Japan, and then just drop them off again. Any takers? Yeah,
Yes.
Barb? Okay.
I can pack makeup and shoes and unmentionables and everything else, and I don't have to deal with it. I can take a little bag, sign me up. I just flew to Florida, and it was the biggest pain in the ass. And sorry about going to Florida, by the way, but it was a family thing. Sign me up, as long as they make them Western sizes and not Asian sizes, because it doesn't always work. As somebody that orders clothes online, why not?
Yeah.
I think it's
All right.
great if it's clean.
In fact, many of the things that you mentioned that you would pack anywhere, I'm sure you could probably rent those as well, Barb. So you can even make those you could make those mentionable. Well, no, I mean I've been to Tokyo, and at 7-Eleven you can actually buy white dress shirts and ties and underwear, and part of that is because so many people work crazy hours, they can't commute home, they got to turn it back around, so they can then just go ahead and stay in a pod hotel in Tokyo, and then go to 7-Eleven and buy a Slurpee and buy a white shirt. Just don't spill the Slurpee on the white shirt, and you're fine. So I don't know. That might actually be intriguing to go ahead and try. Well, anyways, we're at that part of the show where I think we're going to go to a commercial break.
We're going to do a commercial, and then we have another very brief non sequitur. But
okay.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
okay, and now we have this 9-second video. You have to listen carefully to get the full gist of it. And it says nothing to do with anything except it's just funny.
Your dad died while having sex with your mom, and you've said that you want to go out the same way. You and your mom need to set up some boundaries.
No, it's not true.
If you haven't seen the Between the Ferns series, especially the bloopers, they're pretty awesome as well. But his interview with Obama was one of my favorites.
Very funny. Yeah.
So okay.
All right.
Well, Alan, I think we're at that time.
All right.
Downtown Detroit, Robert Wells, Schmuck of the Week.
All right, folks, we've got to go ahead and name our Schmuck of the Week. Barb, we're going to start with you.
Thank you. UPS. UPS this week, their profits are down to only $2.5 billion. I feel very bad for them. There's going to be a big strike, you guys. There's going to be a massive strike, and it's probably going to be followed by a UAW strike. And there's a lot of good reasons for it. Two-tier. Somebody's making $2.5 billion in a quarter, and they don't think that's enough. And they have, I'm a friend with our UPS driver. He doesn't have air conditioning in his truck. He's working 12 hours a day. He's lugging things up and down stairs. They're using contractors. It's really time after the pandemic and all that we've switched to online shopping and stuff to take care of these people. And I think the UPS is sadly underestimating Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters. His initials are SOB, and it's a good metaphor. So watch for that.
Well, just to provide a bit of a counterpoint to that, Barb, I got to say, I mean, they do get to wear shorts to work, and I don't. I mean, I'm just saying. So
you work from home, of course you can.
That's only for this show. I got to be on campus, man. COVID's over, don't you know? All right.
You're right.
Point taken. Okay, Anthony, who's your Schmuck of the Week?
I got to give it to DTE Energy. Yeah. Operating out here with 80-year-old equipment, price hikes when you have the worst response times in the country. We need to municipalize our energy right now.
That's all I got to say about that. Don't shut our power off. Okay. All right. So 2 corporate schmucks already on there. Paul.
We've got John Adams, who mentioned about getting rid of Louis DeJoy at the Postal Service.
Yeah, well, I have to agree at least a little bit. DTE may be the worst utility in the country. I can go through long stories about being out for as much as 15 days in a 60-day period. So, Anthony, you and I are definitely in sync on that one. Elon Musk has to be the real schmuck, though. Every time something goes wrong at Twitter, he adds something else to get people pissed off at. And now there's actually some competition. And by the way, he is now suing. He's going to be suing Thread for claiming intellectual property theft. And it appears some of that has to do with some of the people he fired instantly after taking over Twitter. They actually wanted to get jobs, and they went over to Thread. And he's very upset that those same people he fired now are creating a competition for him. Anthony, you talked about that 600 tweet limit and so many things. It just seems like Musk is determined to destroy Twitter, not save it.
Well, I think Paul, you might be right, because I mean, rumor has it that the next thing Zuckerberg's coming up with might be a Facebook electric vehicle. So this idea of people moving over from
yeah, well, we've already seen how well Apple has done with electric vehicles. How many times have I written that story that they're going to have the electric vehicle? They disband and they reform. They disband and they reform that operation. So when it comes to Tesla, as much as I can't stand the guy, I mean, their sales are up and everything else. But when it comes down to showing that he can repeat his success, Twitter shows that he is the schmuck of the week.
Yeah.
All right. Joel.
I got one that's not corporate nor all that substantive. I'm a massive Lions fan. Last year, the Lions drafted a guy named Jameson Williams. They traded up to get him to do so. He didn't play last year. He had like 1 catch. That 1 catch was incredible, but he had 1 catch. This year, he's been suspended for 6 months because of gambling. Okay, but he's coming back, and so there's questions about this guy's character and judgment. Over the July 4th weekend, he posted a video of him lighting off fireworks. This guy makes a living with his hands. A few years ago, there was I think Jason Paul, a defensive end for the Giants, blew off his hand at a fireworks. So Jameson Williams, your whole life are your hands. It's your whole life. That's how you're going to make your living. What are you doing with lighting fireworks? I mean, that is just stupidity. Your judgments are Russian. Pisses me off that they traded up to get him when he's doing this type of bullshit. So he is my schmuck of the week.
You know what? It's interesting, if I can say, about gambling in sports. It's so insane that sports is like being all, on a high horse about gambling. Watch Bally Sports, the Tigers, they'll have in the corner, and they'll say, if Cabrera gets a hit, people can win this much. If so-and-so pitches, gets 3 strikeouts, you can win so much. I mean, they're just, it's so insane at this point that they can even.
I mean, it's absurd. And the rule that he was suspended for may not be well explained, but playing with, fireworks with your precious hands is, to me, insane. Don't do it.
Well, I mean, I can't even listen to like sports talk radio anymore, because all they're talking about is odds. There's really no analysis that's outside the gambling domain. But don't worry, Joel. I think that he's got a contingency plan in case he blows off one of his hands. He's going to just go ahead and put stickum over his entire uniform.
Why?
And
Velcro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got his bases covered.
There's a question about his hands. That is a question.
My schmuck of the week is Walt Nauta, the Trump's guy. I mean, look, what are you doing sticking up for this guy? I mean, yeah, you're going to lose your job. Get a new job. Work for somebody who's got some decency. You go, what are you doing, like standing up for this guy? Is it because you're afraid you're going to lose be the gopher for this crazy man? Give it up, man, and just cooperate cooperate and, get out of there, man. Why are you being part of this whole, I mean, he seems like such a loyal soldier. So I can see where, and Trump, he just looks gaga eyes at Trump. But, Trump's not going to stick up for him. Believe me, if it came down to him, Trump would rat the guy out in a second.
Yeah, he'd sell his own kids out.
One-way street with Trump, not a two-way street.
Yeah.
Well, my schmuck of the week, if I was still in England, was going to be Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who decided to jump into the conflict between Australia and England in a cricket match by going ahead and criticizing a call, even though it was perfectly legal when Australia got one of England's batsmen out. The problem was Sunak never even defended the BBC or the freedom of the press when the Indian government raided the BBC offices for showing a documentary critical of Prime Minister Modi. But actually, for those who think that this show leans too much on one side, my schmuck of the week is hopefully going to go ahead and countermand that. It is the Biden administration for looking into sharing cluster bombs with Ukraine, despite the fact that they've been outlawed by 120 plus countries. Interestingly enough, not by the United States, not by Russia, and not by Ukraine. But the fact that they're putting these weapons out there, which is going to cause an indiscriminate amount of harm, damage, carnage, and destruction, is for the human rights oriented Biden administration, at least how they profess themselves, really a shonda. And so for my schmuck of the week, it is the Biden administration in toto. So there you go.
All right.
Well, we got a few corporate schmucks. We've got a football player. We've got an adopted son of Donald Trump, and we've got a electric vehicle and social media baron, all as a schmuck. So I think a pretty well balanced meal all around. Well, thank you all for being on the show, discussing all of these topics. I'm sure we're going to have a whole slate of new ones next week as well. Thank you, Anthony Bryant. Thank you, Barb Ingalls. Thank you, Paul Eisenstein. Thank you, Joel Sklar. And thank you, Allan Lengel, with, as always, the last word.
Drive home safely.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great week.
Good, guys. Have a great weekend.